Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar about wireless solutions for tribal and indigenous communities presented by CTIconnect and Cambium Networks. My name is Suzanne Urash and I will be your moderator for today's event. Today's presenter is John Seaman, the Regional Sales Manager at Cambium Networks. Also joining us today is Tyler Larkin, Senior Vice President of Sales at CTIconnect. We'd like to hear from you today, so ask questions and share your comments. Please use the question and answer panel that's located at the bottom of your Zoom player to share at any time during the webinar. There will also be some questions or some time for questions at the end. We will also have 2 polls that we'll be launching during the webinar, and I'll give you some time to answer each one, and we'll share the results after the poll. With that, let's go get started. Tyler, I'm handing the baton to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'd like to start by just saying a few brief words about CTIconnect. We are a premier distributor of wireless equipment, and we've been around since 1995. We service a diverse base of customers from Fortune 500 companies all the way down to very, very rural internet service providers. We work with both end users and integrators, and we cover a very wide range of verticals and technology solutions. In addition to equipment supply, we're able to help our customers with things like engineering and network design, and we offer a world-class supply chain service. We're part of the Convergence family, which gives us a unique skill set that sets us apart from other distributors. Mitotech, for example, is one of our sister companies that helps our customers with things like IT network and infrastructure services. We have IPPay, which is a payment processing and billing company that specializes in things like card not present and subscription-based billing needs. And then lastly, we have iNet Capital, which offers a wide range of funding options for our customers to help ensure that their projects stay on time and on budget. Next slide, please. So at CTIconnect, your vision is our mission. We understand that this world can be daunting and even scary at times, and it's very, very complex. And we view our customer relationships as partnerships. We're here to provide you all the help that we possibly can and bring in our partners that make sense to help you get your project completed. We're in this thing for the long haul, and we'll be with you every step of the way. Our win is your win, and we will not stop until you get what you want or what your goal is. Although CTI is headquartered in Florida, we've got distribution facilities strategically placed across the country to ensure we can get product just about anywhere in a quick and efficient manner. Similarly, our staff is also placed throughout the country to ensure we cover all time zones, all customers, regardless of where you are, to make sure we can work around your schedule. The topic we're about to discuss today is one of the reasons we get up in the morning. These challenges, helping customers solve these problems and see their projects to completion, is what drives us. We only align the best partners with our customers, and we're pretty judicious in choosing who we work with. With that in mind, Cambium Networks is a premier supplier of fixed wireless solutions. Their products have been used by over 10,000 network operators, ISPs, public safety agencies, and governments around the world. Cambium has already worked with countless tribal networks in North America. As Cambium's Distributor of the Year for the last 3 years, I can confidently say that they embody the partnership model that we take so seriously here at CTIconnect. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce John Seaman, who's going to take us the rest of the way through this webinar. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Tyler. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar. Today's topic should be one of great interest. It's very timely this year, probably more than ever. And we're going to be talking about broadband connectivity solutions for tribal communities. And with regards to tribal communities, you've heard this term about the digital divide, and it's time to bridge the digital divide. And nowadays, it's more important than ever. And it's not without challenges to make this happen, because it's a big problem in a lot of areas. Tribal communities today still remain some of the least connected in North America. And a large percentage of Native Americans still don't have any access to high-speed internet whatsoever. Some of them don't even have cell phone service. And these communities require reliable broadband just as much as any other community. And that is important for providing economic opportunities, remote jobs, access to essential services. Kids need to go to schools, especially during this time of the pandemic. Elders need to get access to remote health care. And as such, broadband is the tool that can facilitate so many of those very, very important services. But as I mentioned, it's not without its challenges, especially on tribal lands. Tribal lands have a lot of obstacles present to deploy reliable broadband networks. And it's everything from the geography. A lot of tribal regions are in remote, hard to reach areas. These remote areas can be very difficult to serve. It's due to vast open areas. It's due to difficult terrain. It can be very expensive due to low population density. And as such, a lot of the traditional telco and cable providers haven't done a great job in servicing these areas. What else? Fiber infrastructure is not always available. It may not be viable. It can be very expensive. And another key component of all this is funding and expertise to deploy broadband, to engineer networks correctly. And I personally and Cambium Networks have been involved in a lot of tribal projects. And, through my experience in working with tribes and other partners that work with tribes, we've kind of identified the important steps to take. I call these kind of the steps to success. And it all begins with planning. And planning is really important because you need to decide, does the tribe want to become a WISP? That's a wireless internet service provider. Are we trying to connect a few buildings? What is the size, the scale, the scope of any given project? And figuring out how to best approach requires coordination with different entities, the tribal planning department, council members, tribal leadership. The IT department is instrumental. Any entities involved in economic development, the tribal school system. And coordination also is important with regional telecom operators, the regional telcos, cable operators, because access to nearby telecom infrastructure is really important. There's government agencies that can assist, such as the USDA. So a lot of planning required, and part of the objective of that planning component is really to decide what type of network are we going to build, who's going to operate the network, who's going to maintain the network. So lots of planning required. And step two would be the funding, right? There's lots of funding mechanisms. Going out and getting funding can be a time-consuming process, but there is money out there. There's lots of state, federal loans, grants. USDA has a number of options, and RUS as well. There's funding mechanisms like the Reconnect, RUS Reconnect Fund. There's Community Connect. School districts have access to E-rate. And there's other funding options as well through private entities. There is leasing options through companies like CTI. So you got to figure out how to fund the network. And one of the other considerations that could help get these networks off the ground, I strongly encourage you to consider public and private partnerships. working with nearby service providers, cable companies, telcos. Sometimes the public-private approach to funding and building networks turns out to be the most viable. So then the third step after you've done some planning and some funding is to design and build. There's a lot of resources out there to help make that happen. And designing a viable network, you're going to be utilizing available spectrum in different frequency bands. You're going to be hopefully making use of existing towers within the tribal boundaries or beyond. Use existing structures like buildings. Essentially any high points on the land serve as excellent points to put wireless infrastructure. And there are tools available to help you do the planning. Wireless vendors like Cambium, we have a very powerful planning tool known as LinkPlanner, which I'll show you later on in the presentation. And tribal entities or consultants or system integrators or Cambium Networks, there's a lot of people available to help design these networks. Some of the other considerations are how are you going to provide power on these remote sites? And a lot of times that's going to come down to solar. Solar powered sites are very common. And then if construction is required for towers, you're going to be engaging contractors to do tower construction and then equipment installation. So throughout all these stages, and especially during the design and build stage, it's an excellent opportunity for tribal members and leadership to be involved in that process. Work with the engineers, work with the planners, work with the contractors. And it's an opportunity to transfer knowledge into the tribe. And that's going to serve the community for many years to come. So those are the steps to success. And then we're kind of going to get into a little bit more of the details and talk a little bit about the frequencies. And, wireless spectrum really, truly is a very precious natural resource. Spectrum is required. Unless you're building an all fiber network, you're going to need radio frequencies. And for the first time that I'm aware of, the FCC has recently granted additional spectrum exclusively to tribes. And they did this through the 2.5 gigahertz EBS tribal priority filing window, which was occurring through a lot of this year. I think the window closed and in the end, I believe about 214 tribes applied for and were approved for 2.5 gigahertz EBS spectrum. EBS is the educational broadband spectrum. And one of the great things about EBS or 2.5 gigahertz is it's very advantageous for hard to reach areas. And by that, I mean it propagates very well. It can go through some obstacles, through some trees. It's a high power spectrum. So it's very useful in many areas to kind of fill in a lot of areas that cannot be reached with other frequencies. So 2.5, if your tribe has access to it, that's great. It's going to really facilitate building a first-class wireless network. With that said, other frequency bands should be considered. So 2.5 gigahertz is great, but it is not necessarily the one magic bullet that solves all the needs of the tribe. There's plenty of other spectrum resources out there, including CBRS, which is 3 gigahertz. 5 gigahertz remains very viable. There's a lot of spectrum in 5 gigahertz, which is unlicensed spectrum. We have 900 megahertz, which is also an unlicensed band and also very advantageous for propagation. And also we have frequencies in the millimeter and microwave spectrum above 6 gigahertz. that are used and can be used for your backhaul or your licensed microwave point-to-point. So 2.5 gigahertz is fantastic. It's a valuable, bankable asset for any entity that has access to it. It really provides a lot of coverage, and it really serves as an excellent catalyst for beginning these tribal broadband project discussions. And another frequency band that should be considered, along with the 2.5 and the 5 gigahertz unlicensed, I just wanted to touch on CBRS, because CBRS is another new frequency band which became available this year. It's in the 3 gigahertz range, and previously there was 50 megahertz available for service providers under the old FCC Part 90 rules. But this year in 2020, the 3 gigahertz spectrum transitioned into the new era, which is called CBRS. And CBRS opened up 150 megahertz of spectrum. And there is a priority access tiered method to utilizing the spectrum. All the devices that are using the spectrum need to be connected into a centralized frequency coordination system. But Cambium Networks has worked out all those details in the software. We've gotten all of our 3 gigahertz products approved for CBRS. And it has opened a lot of doors, and a lot of tribes are using 3 gigahertz in addition to 2.5 and 5 gigahertz and the other frequency bands that I mentioned. So that's a little bit about spectrum. And I think at this point, we're going to take our first quick poll, online poll, and Suzanne will present that.
Great. Okay, thanks, John. Okay, so our first poll I am going to launch right now, and you should see the questions on our screen. So let me just launch the polling here. Okay, so the poll is, what is the current status of your broadband project? So these are the 5 different options: is pre-planning or early discussion, detailed planning stage, funding stage, design stage, or construction and deployment stage. So I'll just give a couple seconds here for folks to give the answers, and then I'll go ahead and launch the results, and we can talk about them. Good, we're starting to get quite a few answers already. I'm just going to give a couple more seconds. So those of you that didn't answer, if you could see if any of these pertain, and feel free to participate. Great. Okay, it looks like we've got almost everybody voting. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll right now and share it. And this is very interesting. So, okay, I just went ahead and shared the poll. And so, John, how does that fit in with your expectations, considering the number of votes here?
That fits in quite as expected. And the reason is the 2.5 gigahertz filing window closed a couple months ago. The list of tribes, entities that qualified for the spectrum was recently released. So a lot of entities out there, tribal entities, are in this stage. They're in the early pre-planning, early discussion, trying to decide what to do with this spectrum. And as I mentioned, it kind of serves as an excellent kind of starting point as to, where do you go from here? And, as tribes interested in becoming a WISP, plenty of tribes operate ISPs. That's a good model for many. That's not necessarily always the best model for some. Broadband is an interesting service. It's kind of like a utility to be deployed, and it's not always necessarily a cash cow in terms of revenue coming in from broadband. But what's most important is the benefit that comes from how the spectrum is used. And I think those types of discussions need to happen during the planning stage, and that will help you determine how best to make use of the spectrum, how to build a network, what are the ultimate goals. So great results and pretty much as expected. All right.
Okay, great.
Okay, thanks for that poll. I think we got one more coming up here in a minute. So let's talk about, let's get into the what do we do with the spectrum? How do we design a network? And I've got tons of these types of graphics that show point-to-point and point-to-multipoint, but I kind of like this one because it kind of provides a lot of detail on what you're going to be looking at in your kind of your early planning stage, but also more so when you get into the design stage. And it kind of begins here with fiber infrastructure, right? Some tribal projects are going to involve construction of fiber, but in all cases, you're going to need to connect to the fiber infrastructure at some point, either through your local, your local telecom operators. So I encourage those conversations during the planning early on is, how do we, get that first connection into the internet? And from there, the technology is fairly simple and straightforward. Really, you're going to be deploying combinations of point-to-point links, or we call these backhaul links. So you have your point-to-point. So you're going from a point of presence over to another tower. And ultimately, all the networks, or most of the networks, are going to involve a combination of point-to-point. These are your high capacity, potentially longer range backhaul links. And then what we call point-to-multipoint. This is your last mile broadband distribution, going from access points or base stations, sending the signal out then to homes, to businesses, schools, medical care facilities. And it doesn't stop with that. Community hotspots should be considered. I know during the pandemic, early on, especially when a lot of the schools first closed, students who didn't have broadband in their home were going to public areas in some locations to get access to broadband, whether it's public Wi-Fi outdoors, indoors. Cambium provides all those products kind of like all the way down the chain, point-to-point, multi-point, Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi, we kind of break into two categories. There is in-home Wi-Fi, which is done through in-home routers. So we call that residential Wi-Fi. And our Wi-Fi devices also, some of the models include ATA ports. So you can set up dedicated phone service with dial tone through voice over internet with the routers, or the routers can just be routers which don't have the ATA. But in all cases, the network is manageable, or it's very important to consider manageability. You need to have the ability to monitor all the devices, upgrade the devices, for example, when new firmware comes out. You need the easy ability to onboard devices. So we provide all that through a management platform. And for whatever design that you're coming up with, it's important to think about, well, how will the network be managed? And what will be the management platform? And Cambium provides a very, very good free management tool that works across the board. Again, talking about the spectrum on the point-to-multipoint portion of it, you're going to utilize a variety of spectrum, most likely 2.5. I think that's the main audience we have here today. Perhaps 3 gigahertz CBRS, 5 gig. And there's other frequencies coming into play now as well. We have 60 gigahertz. You can deploy gigabit wireless in a mesh topology. So lots of different ways to do this. One thing I've learned about tribal projects that I've been involved recently is the majority of them are wireless. Fiber is expensive. Sometimes it's very difficult to deploy, maybe cost prohibitive. So wireless is a great way to reach remote areas and residents in very, very far-flung regions. And okay, so that's a quick overview of the topology. And Suzanne, I think we have another poll.
Yes, it's time for our next poll. Okay, I'm going to launch the poll again, and you should see some questions on your screen. So let me just launch the next poll. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this poll is which choice best describes your experience with fixed wireless? You have experience, no experience, moderate experience with a few wireless links, currently operating fiber and telco network, no wireless, currently operating wireless only on a WISP network, or currently operating hybrid fiber telco with a WISP network. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this polling. There we go. So I'll give everyone a few minutes to submit your votes, and we'll see how everybody fares compared to each other. We've got a couple more. Okay, we're a little bit up to a little more than halfway there. If there's anyone else that didn't vote, it'd be great if we can get your vote so we can finish this up and see how you guys all fared. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results. And it looks like the moderate experience with a few wireless links tends to be the top experience with fixed wireless, followed by currently operating a hybrid with a telco and WISP network, and then that followed by no experience. So, John, how does that fit with your expectations?
Pretty much what I expected. I think the majority of tribal entities have had some experience with a little bit of wireless. It's been around for a very long time, and I guess the next step is how do you take that moderate experience with a few wireless links to build a much more larger network, which is going to provide broadband for a large number of residents. And I'm glad to see we also have some experienced telco type ISPs or representatives here on the call as well. There's a lot of expertise out there. That's another avenue to learn more. And during the planning stages, I do encourage folks just getting started in this, new to this, to reach out to other tribes that have done this. There's plenty of tribes out there that have built full-blown, very large ISPs, and a lot of those are in the process of kind of like upgrading those networks right now. Some of them are in the process of overlaying 2.5 gig spectrum into those networks. So yeah, I encourage everybody to kind of reach out to your contacts out in the community and share the experience.
Okay, and I just stopped the poll, this particular poll, and I'll let you get moving on with your presentation.
All right, so the next part of this, we're going to start talking about the products, kind of get into the main kind of focus here, which is to talk about the wireless technology platforms out there. And I'm only going to be talking about the multi-point platforms. If there's questions later on about point-to-point, we can talk about that too. But so Cambium offers 3 point-to-multi-point platforms. And the first one that I'm going to mention and the main topic of today's presentation is cnRanger. And cnRanger is our 2.5 gigahertz EBS product. It's relatively new within the mix of products. It was launched late last year and has been getting deployed throughout the year and has been kind of the main focal point of a lot of conversations I've been having with the tribes. So cnRanger is the 2.5 gig solution. Our flagship product line is known as the PMP 450. The 450 product line has been around in various kind of generations of the product for almost 20 years, going way back to when Cambium was actually began within Motorola before it spun out. And it kind of represents years of innovation, and the product line just keeps evolving. It's a very high capacity product. This is our product that does massive multi-user MIMO. Definitely going to be the most scalable product for networks, and very popular product choice within tribal networks as well. And then the third product is ePMP, which is also a very popular product line, point to multipoint, also been around a long time. It's a bit more cost friendly, I guess, a lower cost product, but also very scalable, very advanced features for many networks. ePMP is absolutely ideal. And for many of the projects I'm working on and Cambium is working on, have been involved with, we're seeing all three of these. Not in every case, but in some instances, it makes sense to use some cnRanger for the 2.5, maybe some 450 for high capacity, or ePMP. So it kind of depends. But working with CTI and other partners and Cambium directly, we can kind of help you figure out which would be the appropriate product or appropriate mix of products to meet the goals for the broadband project. All right, now we're going to focus in on to cnRanger. So cnRanger, again, it's our LTE based, it's our 2.5 gig product. It is our LTE based product. The name cnRanger kind of is a homage to range and being able to cover, more kind of like remote areas. And that's one of the benefits you get from an LTE based product. So when I mentioned the 450 and ePMP, those are more proprietary based. But what we've done with cnRanger was we've taken LTE chipsets and LTE technology and built a wireless or a fixed wireless product, which is really optimized for internet service providers. And it's comprised of really just the three main points here. We've got a baseband unit, or the BBU, and a remote radio head. And they handle both the RAN part of the network and the EPC, which I'll get into here in a minute. So that's the part that goes on the tower. And then you've got the subscriber modules, which go on the homes and the businesses. And they're very easy to install, very robust. And then the other component to this, which is important, is the management platform, right? cnMaestro is Cambium's network management system. So the NMS working with this equipment, it all works in hand. So let's just talk about LTE in general and kind of maybe set cnRanger apart from some of the competing solutions. And one thing to keep in mind about LTE is that it was developed for mobility. And mobility, cell phone carriers, there's a lot of complexities that have to be dealt with in an LTE mobile network. So what we've done is taken what we like about LTE, propagation characteristics and some of the other aspects, and built it into a product, but remove some of the other complexities. So complexity is not good. We want to keep things simple. Along with that complexity, on other competing LTE solutions comes a lot of cost. That's not good. We want to keep the cost down. And also, those complexities of LTE are not necessarily service provider friendly. So that's also a negative. And just to kind of talk about a traditional LTE network and what are those complexities that I alluded to. So this slide really kind of tries to show what are some of those complexities. So a traditional LTE solution consists of the radio access network, which is the eNode Bs, and all of that infrastructure is communicating to what's called the Evolved Packet Core, or the EPC, which is the core of an LTE network, which is there to provide lots of features and functionality that aren't going to be very important for a simple broadband network. Things like the mobility management entity, a home subscriber server, different gateways, different policy control provisions. So there's a lot of complexity with that. There's a lot of cost associated with that complexity. It's all in the cloud. And the other kind of final component of an LTE network is the UE, or user equipment, or CPE. So Cambium's approach with cnRanger was we take that evolved packet core, the EPC, and we virtualize it, and we embed it into the BBU, into the base unit. So all of that, all those features are built into the hardware itself. The complexities of the MME and the gateways, and also simplified the overall management of the system. And we enable a very flat network architecture, a layer 2, which is kind of the preferred method for fixed wireless, to keep a simple layer 2 network, keep that functionality simple, so that it's easy to manage, easy to deploy, but we still maintain those aspects of LTE that we like, right? LTE does have a very good over-the-air interface, or very good over-the-air protocol, which allows propagation. It allows devices to work with very, very weak signal, and that's just going to help with coverage and range. And so we keep all of what we like about LTE, discard things that aren't necessary because we're not doing mobility, and put everything into a very simple package. And again, these are the 3 components. There's only 3 components to the system: the BBU, or the baseband unit, which goes in the cabinet or the shelter or the building, below the antenna. And then up on the antenna, you've got a radio head and an antenna. High power. This is a high power radio head. Typically, we deploy these with 90-degree sectors. And then out at the subscriber location, there is a CPE, or we call it a subscriber module, or SM. And the Cambium SM is very robust. It's designed, like everything else we do, to be extremely reliable, built to withstand the elements, whether it's the freezing, snowy conditions in Alaska for the northern Alaskan tribes, or for those out in the hot deserts. So you want equipment which is extremely reliable, and cnRanger provides all that. This shows a typical deployment. Again, it's pretty simple. A baseband unit down at the base of the tower can support up to 4 radio heads. You can deploy 1 or 2 up to 4. You can add additional BBUs as necessary, and everything is accessible when you've got the baseband unit down in the shelter. You've got access to your data ports, and it's just easy to provision, easy to manage. So that's your typical cnRanger site. And just to kind of recap the differentiators of what we've done. So we've taken a standard, which is LTE, and we removed the cost and the complexity. And we have taken the aspects of LTE which are advantageous, which is mainly coverage and range, and built it into this simple platform. Take advantage of those LTE over-the-air features and capabilities. We take Cambium's expertise on the hardware design. We want hardware which is robust, reliable, going to stand up to the elements. Created a product which is simple to deploy. It is very simple. Anybody who has deployed traditional LTE networks can attest. There's a lot of complexities with that. And this product is very, very, very simple. I was surprised how simple it is. So that's it, you know, and we've got the built-in graphic user interface. We've got cnMaestro, which is the management tool. And it is a standard again. So yes, you see in these pictures here, the Cambium CPE, or the subscriber module. Third-party subscriber modules will work because LTE is a standard. So that's an option as well. Okay. I guess, you know what, Suzanne, before I continue on, maybe we should just take a quick break here and see if there are any questions that have come up.
There is one question that just came up here. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of the various spectrum options?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, I think we've talked a lot about 2.5. So 2.5 is licensed spectrum. You own it, provided you don't have neighboring tribes, which I have come across a couple instances where there are tribal boundaries which are adjacent. But in general, when you own the spectrum, you don't have to worry about interference. You kind of control your frequency planning, and it's very, very valuable to have licensed spectrum. 2.5 also being a lower frequency, the lowest of the group, it propagates better. Just being a low frequency, 2.5 is relatively low. It propagates better than 5 gig or 3 gigahertz. And I just misspoke, there is one lower, it's 900 megahertz. So I covered kind of the advantages of 2.5. Great all-around spectrum. 20 megahertz channels are the standard LTE channel sizes. So we can't do the very wide channels. So this would be an area where maybe 5 gigahertz would be advantageous, or 3 gig might be better than 2.5 because we can go to wider channels. And there's certain things we can do in the other bands. But 2.5 is great for being licensed and also propagation. I mentioned 900 megahertz. 900 is fantastic for propagation. It's fantastic. The only problem with 900 megahertz is there's only like 26 megahertz in the entire band. So it tends to get used up fairly quickly. But 900 is a great frequency for the most difficult, hardest to reach areas, but it does require clean spectrum to operate in it, and it is unlicensed. 3 gigahertz. I got just a couple others. 3 gigahertz is the CBRS band. And the advantage there is CBRS 3 gig allows very high transmit power. So similar to 2.5, we can go very high transmit power. We got great range. We got lots of spectrum. We can do very fancy things like multi-user MIMO with 3 gigahertz. The downside to 3 gig is you are somewhat dependent on the SAS spectrum allocation system to do the frequency coordination. But in tribal lands, which are kind of like remote from others using the spectrum, there should be plenty of 3 gig spectrum to be used. And then 5 gigahertz is a great frequency. It's unlicensed. There's hundreds of megahertz available. 5 gigahertz really is purely kind of a line of sight spectrum though. You know, you really want to have line of sight to use 5 gigahertz. Okay.
We did get a couple more on that specific topic. One question is, can we move our existing 5 gigahertz and 900 megahertz submodule equipment to the 2.5 gigahertz?
Well, I would look at 2.5 gigahertz as an overlay. So if you've already deployed 5 gigahertz and 900 megahertz, coming in now with 2.5 is a great opportunity to overlay, and 2.5 will help fill in a lot of the gaps and give additional capacity. There is no compatibility of equipment. For example, if you've got 900 megahertz equipment, it will not work with a 2.5 gig base station. Also, the LTE product line, like cnRanger, is not compatible with the PMP 450. So there's incompatibilities with the frequencies as well as the equipment itself. But I would view 2.5 as an overlay. Or perhaps, if there's interest in decommissioning older equipment and just going with 2.5, that could be a viable strategy as well.
So then can they ride LTE? This was a question that came up along that. Can they ride LTE over 900 megahertz?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Oh, there is no LTE 900 megahertz product, if that's the question. But we can run LTE 2.5 over 900 megahertz. Okay,
that might be what they mean. There is a question, and it's going back to one of your other slides here, and they had missed the arch map that we had up there for the Wi-Fi, and they wanted to know if the LTE subscriber module, do they need to have boosters out in the field as opposed to just having people able to drive around with their phones? It was just a little bit, they were just wanted to reiterate going back to that slide because there was a receiver attached to the house.
Yeah. So first, I guess, to set kind of the, give a description of fixed wireless. Fixed wireless topology really is based on outdoor devices attached to homes, and these outdoor devices have high gain antennas so that they can reach great distances to the remote tower. So in general, everything that we're doing is fixed wireless. So yes, that involves having antenna on the roof, cable into the home, cable into the router in the home, and then you have Wi-Fi within the home. So that connection back to the network is really outdoors and over the air, over the subscriber module on the roof, like one of these guys here, back to the access point. But LTE, again, it's a standard. 2.5 band 41 is there are devices that actually operate in this band. I'm talking about handheld devices, cell phones. I don't want anybody to think that this type of product or this type of network equipment from Cambium really enables you to become a cell phone operator, but it is possible using 2.5 gig LTE, provided you have a, say a tablet or a phone, which is band 41 enabled, and the right SIM card, it can connect to the network, provided it's in range. So that's a lot of details that I just gave, but just keep in mind that when you're talking about a cell phone or a tablet, these devices, handheld devices, have very, very, very small antennas. So the coverage that you're going to get from one of these small handheld devices cannot be compared to what you can get from a fixed outdoor CPE with a high gain directional antenna, which is aimed directly back at the antenna. So there is an option to cover at close range. So one of the applications we've been involved in is some Alaskan tribal villages, which are very small, right? There's a tower in a small village. They only need to cover a small area, mile or so. And then, in those cases, things like small devices, handheld devices should connect and get a broadband internet connection, but not a telephone connection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you answered the question that they asked. Okay.
Okay. All right, then let's see. I'm going to go back to where we were. Let's go back now to management. Just getting kind of back into the Cambium products here. So I touched on this earlier. It's one thing to build a network and go out and install all the equipment. One of the other considerations is how are you going to manage the network? Managing the networks is really a matter of onboarding devices. Say you've got new subscribers coming onto the network. You've got new devices that are being installed. You know, how do you add these to the network? We have tools that will do that. cnMaestro is our network management system, and it allows you to do things like that. Onboard devices. You can monitor the network. You have nice graphical dashboards, statistics that you can pull up, map views. You can configure devices. You can download firmware. So on occasion, Cambium does come out with new firmware. Firmware comes out from the manufacturer to maybe add new features to the platform, or maybe we found some bugs that we had to fix, or maybe there has to be a security patch, right? All that software management and pushing firmware out to devices can be handled through cnMaestro. It's very simple to use. It's a free program for the cnMaestro Essentials package, and it's very intuitive. Also, since the cnRanger is an LTE product, there is some management of the SIM cards. There's actually a SIM card that goes into the CPE, and between cnMaestro or the GUI itself of cnRanger. So what we're looking at here on this slide is actually the GUI, the graphical user interface of cnRanger. So logged into a baseband unit, which is kind of the brains of the system. And again, you can see it's very simple. You don't need a lot of knowledge to really get this up and running. You certainly don't need any LTE knowledge. There's built-in help. But this is where you come in and do things like, well, let's set the frequencies and let's, kind of like provision the system. And we provide the tools to do that through the GUI and also the cnMaestro, which is the management platform. Okay, so I think this is kind of a recap. cnRanger differentiators, quality. You'll find this throughout the product line. Cambium is known for reliability, quality, robust product. It's going to work. It's going to work for the long term. There's plenty of devices that have been out there 10, 15 years. They really, really last. cnRanger is very simple. I think I've kind of made that point a number of times. LTE can be very complex. I think a lot of tribal entities coming into, considering becoming a service provider at this point, they don't need a lot of complexities. What they need is something that is easy to get going. Providing a lot of features that you need to manage a network, onboard devices. You need a product that has good RF propagation, transmit power, good antennas. That's going to give good range and coverage. Cost of ownership. And I'm not talking just about equipment costs, but the cost to, to manage a network or to provision a network, minimize your truck rolls. You want a network which is very reliable, and that will reduce your operational cost. And I think those are the main points. Management through Maestro. And just a couple other topics here before we wrap it up. I think we're coming to the top of the hour. Design tools. I personally, and then my counterparts and the sales engineers here at Cambium, our partners like CTI, our VAR partners, companies like Intertribe and Native Network, and many others that kind of cater primarily to tribal communities, we will often begin discussions just simply let's design a network. Let's go and let's use our design tools to put together a design. This may not be the final design, but ultimately we will come up with a final design using our tools, primarily LinkPlanner. So LinkPlanner is a free tool that you can download from the Cambium website. It is indispensable. It's very popular. I use it every single day. Very powerful tool for designing networks. We can import network sites. We can import subscriber sites or add them one by one. We can export this data to Google Earth. But as we're using LinkPlanner, we're creating a network. We're connecting the dots, so to speak, creating point-to-point links, creating multi-point links. We're getting a very good analytical prediction of how well this network is going to operate, how much capacity is it going to provide, how much speed can be provided to any single subscriber in terms of megabits per second, and at what reliability. Is it going to be 5 nines? Is it 4 nines? Is it 2 nines? And at what capacity? So LinkPlanner gives us all of that. And it also will provide a bill of materials. We get a bill of materials. Ultimately, that becomes, the basis for ordering the equipment. And LinkPlanner makes that really possible. I don't know what I would do without LinkPlanner. Can't say enough about it. Great tool. All the projects are going to end up, for the most part, in LinkPlanner at some point. And Cambium, CTI, our partners can help you with that just to get started. Or you can use this tool on your own. Super powerful. And there's one other tool which is relatively new, came around last year. This is a heat mapping tool we have. It's called cnHeat. And cnHeat is a little bit it's different than LinkPlanner, although it kind of does something similar. But cnHeat is a RF propagation tool that uses very high resolution GIS data that allows us to predict with a high degree of accuracy coverage. And in this example we're looking at here is we want to look at line of sight coverage. And what you see there on the right, those are 4 homes. And the ones that are circled in red don't have any coverage. So the red kind of like blotchy areas, that would be the signal coming from a tower. And in some of the homes, the signal is being blocked by the trees. So like for example, this rooftop here, it has no coverage at this home because the signal is being blocked by these trees over here. Whereas this home here, the signal is providing, the signal is covering a good portion of the roof. So why is this important? This is useful because you have a good idea of what homes you can cover, what homes you can't cover. Do we need to put in more towers? Do we need more height? How do we address that? And can we figure that out without sending a truck out to do a costly truck roll? And then that kind of brings up to the last slide here. And just to recap real quickly, steps to success. Plan. Start with planning. CARES Act came around this year and a lot of networks are going without a ton of planning. That's great, not always optimal. Do your planning, get your funding, design, reach out to Cambium, reach out to partners, design the network, and then go build it. Engage consultants, engineers, system integrators, wireless networking experts. There are lots out there. Utilize 2.5 spectrum along with the other frequencies. And build your network so that it can be scalable. Scalable for now, or scalable for the future. Serve your needs today, but let's design in a way that it's going to scale in the future. And Cambium is here to help. CTIconnect is here to help. And we have plenty of other partners in our ecosystem available.
Great. So John, it looks like you've covered your presentation, and it looks like we answered the questions as well. So that was a good segue going back. And I do have one more quick poll that I'd like to load right now, and this will help us identify anyone who would like more information right away. So I'll leave this up for several seconds to give you the opportunity to respond. And John and Tyler, in the meantime, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap this up?
Well, I just want to thank you for organizing. I want to thank CTIconnect for organizing the webinar. I think it's a great topic. I am happy to answer any more questions. I should have put my email address up there. But to all attendees, I'm sure we can send out a thank you and be sure to put our contact information in the email.
Yes, great. Thank you. We will be doing that. I would like to thank everyone. We appreciate you for being here. And thanks to John and Tyler for your time. And we will be sending a follow-up email with the link to the presentation. So you'll also have a short anonymous survey that we would like to launch as we end the webinar. So we appreciate you again for completing it, and it will help us improve moving forward. Thank you for joining us today, and don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. And this concludes our webinar. Thank you.